Let's bring in our political panel to weigh in on things. Joining me live from Chicago is MSNBC contributor Jim Warren, and live from Washington, D.C., Christina Bellantoni with CQ Roll Call. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning, Alex.
Okay, Jim, we're going to get to your attire in just a moment at the end, but Christina, what does it say to you that Indiana Governor Mitch Daniels is not running?
Well, it's a couple things. He was somebody that a lot of the people in the Republican field were looking at as an idea person, someone who could sort of get above the fray of trying to attract some of the far-right conservatives in the party and instead be a little bit more moderate, a little bit, he talked about this truce on social issues, and so people were looking to him as maybe somebody that could shake up the field. The fact that he kept the decision prolonged for this long said that he was really wrestling with it. So when he told supporters in a very early morning email that his family was his biggest consideration and basically that his heart just wasn't in it, I think that says a lot about the fact that President Obama is in a fairly strong position for 2012, although I would say that the White House is probably a little worried about getting too overconfident at this point.
Yeah, I want to pick up on that with you, Jim, the president's a strong position right now, because even if the economy stays the way it is, as weak as it's been, can President Obama still win because the GOP, if for no other reason, because the GOP has no legitimate counter?
Yeah, I mean, let me show a firm grasp of the obvious and say for sure, yes. I mean, in some ways, this kind of reminds me on the surface just 20 years ago when the Democratic field was, belittled as the so-called seven dwarfs. George H.W. Bush had approval ratings way high in the 70s. No one could really see somebody coming out of that pack and winning. In fact, a little-known Arkansas governor did, and two of the other seven dwarfs ended up becoming vice presidents, Gore and Biden. So I think it's distinctly possible, particularly, at a time where everything is so fluid, domestic politics, international affairs, the economy, one's not quite sure how things are going to play out, who is going to be the Republican candidate. And, also one should remember just from the electoral standpoint, Alex, if I'm David Axelrod sitting a few blocks away from here, plotting the re-election campaign, I've got to be looking at states that I won in 08, surprisingly, such as Virginia, North Carolina, Mitch Daniels, Indiana, and also Colorado, which have now gone Republican and have lots of reason to be anxious, regardless of whether I have a clue who's going to be my opponent.
Can I ask you both whom you think is the strongest GOP contender at this point? We'll go ladies first.
Well, I think that, obviously former Governor Mitt Romney from Massachusetts sits atop the field. Obviously, he did very well in 2008 without winning, but he maintained a strong position, and he sort of kept quiet. He stayed away from some of the gaffes that you've seen former House Speaker Newt Gingrich make, for example. But I wouldn't discount former Minnesota Governor Tim Pawlenty, who will be announcing his candidacy in Iowa tomorrow. Roll Call is going to have a story on the front page, taking a look at his Iowa strategy. He's sort of duplicating what President Obama did in 2008, staying very, very focused on meeting voters, staying sort of below the fray. But, really, it's a wide open field. Anything could happen, and I wouldn't discount Chris Christie potentially jumping in down the line either.
Though he has said so many times he's not running. I think one time he said, I'm going to put an excellent before I'm not something running. That's it. But what do you think, Jim, in terms of who's the best contender at this point for the GOP?
Yeah, I mean, the least weak right now has to be Mitt Romney as a result of name recognition, raised about $10 million last week in one single day. If he has learned from his mistakes and he's got the resume and a certain stature. But that said, does he have the fire? Does he have the sort of panache to get people excited in Iowa and New Hampshire? I think perhaps not, which is why I believe, look at a current long shot like John Huntsman, former governor of Utah, has just served Obama as ambassador to China. But also I say look at somebody who is not yet in the race, because particularly with Daniels getting out, with Barber getting out, Trump not there any longer, I think there are a lot of folks, whether they're Sarah Palin, whether or not she's a resident of Arizona or whatever, or some other folks like Rick Perry of Texas, who are going to be wondering, could I be the person who lights the fire under the primary electorate?
Can I ask you both, having both tapped Mitt Romney as being the leader right now, is Mitt Romney conservative enough to win the primary and moderate enough to win the general election? Christina?
Well, I think that's a very important question, because we have to remember that it usually is the very tried and true conservatives that elect the nominee in the Republican Party. Now, with John McCain, you've had a lot of conservatives say that they regretted that he was not the conservative that they were looking for in 2008, and they think that that's one reason why he lost to Barack Obama. So Mitt Romney may have a little bit of a struggle. Obviously, he's got some problems with what he did with health care. Republicans really don't like that in Massachusetts. But that's the thing, is who can appeal to those core conservatives, and John Huntsman is probably not that person.
Okay. Answer really quick, if you can, Jim, on whether you think Romney can play both ends of the field, if you will.
Yeah, I think all these guys are conservative enough. But remember, a guy like Romney, a guy like Huntsman conceivably could win this without necessarily winning the first big one in Iowa, such as that was a John McCain strategy. But again, I think look for somebody whose name we haven't really focused on yet, because I think there are a lot of folks out there wondering, should I run? Okay, the soccer shirt really quick, because Nick's going to lose it. Let's go. What's the soccer shirt for? A week next Saturday, the big European Championship team game in London. Wembley Stadium. Manchester United now sponsored gaudily by Aon, the big Chicago insurance broker, against Barcelona. So we've got to go for the locals. Man U versus Barcelona. Thank you very much for the heads up. To both of you, Christina and Jim. Appreciate it. Thanks. Caps and gowns and diplomas. It's that time of year again when students across the U.S. listen to some words of wisdom from world leaders.